And the other question, James?
The other second question is they were wowed by the US tax bracket. They were asking, what about the Canadian tax bracket?
Tony,
well, I think we have a screen there, James. Yeah, that's the Canadian tax bracket. Unfortunately, we don't have good records on the Canadian tax bracket. So we can only make assumptions of where we are and where we're going. And it hasn't been as long. We've tried to get better resources, and there's been a few people that have tried to find better resources for us. And this is about the best. So it's hard to explain what's happening with this because it's pretty flat. It doesn't mean it's going to stay flat. And the average has been 30%. And if you look at it, the creep or the decrease, and I'm saying here, today you're paying 33% on anything over 216,000. And again, these are federal numbers because it's too hard to get into the provincial ones. The federal ones were the ones for the states as well. You're paying 33 over 216, but you were paying 29 over 123. So you could see that it's actually because the brackets have increased, we've actually are in a lower tax bracket now overall than we were back when it was 29 and 123,000 or 29 and 59,000. But doesn't mean it's going to continue that way. We really believe it's going to be closer to the American style of the tax bracket is going to probably increase, and also the taxes are going to change along the way.
Yeah. And one thing that we didn't mention as well is the one thing about governments are always looking for sources of revenue to pay for entitlements and things. They floated a trial balloon last year around this time where they said they may tax principal residents, and they didn't do it because they knew people would just lose it. Everybody got upset very quickly. But when they do that, you know it's coming. It's a matter of when. So how are they going to bring this into effect? It could start with just sort of rental properties or second properties, but eventually they will come after the principal residents, in my opinion. I'd be shocked if they didn't. And we may end up in a US kind of situation where you have an exemption to a certain level. The other thing we didn't talk about was municipal taxes. The municipalities, with the prices of real estate right now, they've got to be licking their chops, waiting for the assessments to go up so they can now do it on the higher market value on those MPAC numbers in Ontario. So there's so many variables. We just want to minimize your tax bite, put as much money in your jeans as possible, and not pay as much tax as you may have to. So we try to do put more money in your jeans. So James, any other questions there?
Oh, we are good for now.
Okay, so let's move on to number 4, Tony, which is I'll spend less in retirement. Let's dispel that myth.
That one's pretty funny. I have more time to do more leisurely things, but I'm going to spend less. So I guess I'm going to golf less. I'm not going to go out more. I'm actually going to sit in a room with 4 walls and stare at the walls. I'm not going to go out and travel. All these things. And those are just some simple things that human nature has. Some people may do that. Some people may not. But home ownership, you touched on it earlier. Taxes will be going up. But with a home ownership, everyone thinks that once they get to 65 and they retire, their homes are paid for and everything's good. Okay, great. If you accomplish paying off your mortgage by the time you retire, that's fantastic for you. However, your ownership just doesn't end. There's still costs for gas, hydro, water, taxes, the maintenance, the insurance. Then you still have a vehicle. Maybe you've gone to 1 vehicle from 2, but you still have a vehicle, and the cost of gas is let's talk about that. $1.52 a liter, and it's going to be $2 they're talking about before the end of the year. And I'm like, okay, we're doing okay. And by the way, they also said that the inflation was going to be temporary. The same guys that are saying that, don't worry, World War I taxes, they're temporary taxes. Yeah, temporary measures. I love temporary. They just never seem to reverse from the temporary. So I kind of chuckle at that. But again, do you want to live at a lower standard of living than you are today? That could be the case. You may be forced into it. But spend less in retirement, I have a hard time seeing that. And I'm talking to my clients. I have a client that's 55, and he goes, I cannot get over he's actually 57 now, sorry, he's been retired a couple of years. He actually goes, I can't get over how busy I am. I'm busier now than I was when I was working. And it's so many, you talk to people that are retired, and I've got a lot of retired clients, and I'm like, well, we got to set an appointment because I'm so busy. I got the grandkids, I got this, I'm doing this, I'm meeting up with my coffee group, I'm meeting up with this group, that group. And it's just amazing how people that are in retirement are busier than they are when they're working, because they actually have more leisure time. And with leisure time, that usually leads to some extra costs.
Yeah,
what do you think of that, Ray?
It's hard to book appointments. I mean, you call somebody up and say, hey, let's do a review meeting on Tuesday. Well, no, I've got choir, or I've got this, I've got that. And then we're golfing, and then we're doing the day trips. And all of a sudden you think you can get them in within a week or so to do a review meeting. All of a sudden you're pushed out 3 weeks. And even then something comes up, it may be a medical appointment. So yeah, the whole thing of I'll be less active. Like you said, what do you do? Stare at the four walls? We just experienced that with COVID, and nobody wants to do that. So that's a big issue. And then just getting back to that $75,000 I mentioned at the beginning with inflation, I'm going to reverse the numbers here now. So 75,000 at 3% inflation today would be like $48,000 in 15 years. So think about living off of 48,000 right now and how that would be. That's in 15 years time. So in 25 years time, it's more like $35,000. So the inflation creep plus everything else you're doing, it's not going to happen. I mean, people try hard, and there is an inflection point. Usually once people hit their 80s, they do slow down. Like my parents did, and they weren't traveling as much. Their day trip would be down to a local flea market, half-hour drive or something. But while you're healthy and everything else, you're going to do as much as you can, and you're not going to spend less. It's going to be very hard, which ties us into that slide where we talked about sequence of returns and needing when you need the money might be at that point in time what's most critical. For example, we have a slide that shows the costs of rent within a retirement home. Thanks, James. So in London, a 1-bedroom retirement home, this is from 2019, 715 square feet is $5,800 a month. And that's kind of probably on the lower side. If you look down to Toronto, it's about $2,000 a month, but for 150 square feet. So if you want something comparative in Toronto to London, you're talking close to $10,000 a month. So this is why all this ties in, it's very much linked. Inflation will do damage. Unfortunately, age does, just because inflation hits the elderly more with costs of healthcare. And then when you need the money the most, you may not have it. Yes, there are government nursing homes. Waiting lists are long for those. And the other thing is, do you really want to go into some of these institutions, having worked hard your whole life? So there's a lot of trade-offs here that people have to understand. So spending less, it's not going to work. Let's make sure that you've got yourself covered from as many angles as possible. So we've kind of run a little bit over time here. We apologize. James, are there any questions at this point?
No, we're good.
Okay. So Tony, any closing thoughts here on the 4 myths?
No, I think we've covered these fairly well. And inflation, again, is one of the ones that really bites people that are in retirement, because it's inflation. If you're working, you can actually try to make some extra money, and hopefully you will make extra money to compensate. You might have a side job or something. Once in your retirement, you're usually pretty fixed on what you've got, and everything eats away at it. And it's how do we eat away at it and do it economically, and how do we do it tax minimization to stretch that dollar as far as you can. And hopefully, and none of us are born with a barcode on our head saying when our expiry date is or best before date. So hopefully we're living well and long and healthy, but we don't know.
Right.
And